don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Monday, December 5th, 2022. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. Yes, we are back. After a round of flu, a round of holidays, a round of insane work schedules, we are back. Yes, this is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards across the country. You can join us also at the end of the week for our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And you can also check out our once or twice monthly The Wednesday Show with Cyril Michaleko. Cyril, of course, is the editor-in-chief at the Bucks County Beacon, and he joins me every once in a while to drill down into Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and international politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You can also, gotta shout out the welcome to our new Mastodon community. Yes, as part of the great Twitter exodus, Raging Chicken is now also on Mastodon. You can find us on Mastodon at rcpress@union.place. That's at rcpress@union.place. And you can support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And look, if you're listening to this as a podcast, make sure you hit that 5-star review. Let everybody know kind of why you like the show. That helps other people find the show. If you're looking for more PA-based progressive talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. every night. YouTube channel, Twitter, wherever you get your streams. If you want all the information about all his shows, head on over to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you've got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. Yes, the amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. For all you gamers out there, check out The Game In. The Game In with 2 N's. The Game In is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s to latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. And look, kids get discounts when they get A's in the report card. Can't beat that. Check them out on their Facebook page. Follow them on Twitter at The Game In. If you got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, shoot them a message and shoot them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. Special shout out goes out to Jonathan Mann, as always, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayMan. That's with 2 N's, at SongADayMan on Twitter. And you know it, we can't let Paul Martino and his oligarch friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Raging Chicken has teamed up with Levelfield to launch a truly community-rooted PAC to invest in organizing, supporting local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmasking the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. We're putting small dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. And look, school board elections are coming up in 2023, so we are in full go mode now. Head on over to ragingchicken.levelfield.net where you get all the information you want to know and you can drop your donation. Now tonight, I'm very, very pleased to be back here once again. 2, to be doing this show tonight on the eve of the Georgia runoff election, right? And 3, to be welcoming, of course, Raelyn Roberson to the show. Raelyn, did I get that? Is it Roberson? Did I get that? I forgot to ask you that before.
Yeah, no, totally. You got it right.
Roberson, because I must say, it's okay. Roberson and Robinson, just want to make sure. Okay, Roberson, my bad, my bad. Okay.
No, I will say there's like a family feud. There are the Robersons and there's the Robinson, and we do like argue about which one's right. I'm on Team Roberson,
Okay, well,
so
I'm
that's
glad.
just calling
Well, I'm
it.
on your team. How's that? There you go. All right. Well, Raelyn is the field coordinator for stopping cyber suppression at Common Cause. Now, here we are, as I was saying, on the eve of the Georgia Senate runoff, and we'll be talking about the challenge of mis and disinformation that has been infecting the U.S. and global elections, for that matter. Now, Raelyn and her team work to fight back against the spread of online election disinformation and hold social media platforms accountable for their role in the spread of election lies. Raelyn provides trainings and encourages anyone and everyone to stop cyber suppression. During monitoring shifts, she leads volunteers in recognizing, searching for, and reporting bad actors who threaten democracy by spreading election lies. And if you want to read more about Raelyn and Common Cause's work, you can check out Jenny Stevenson's excellent article in the Bucks County Beacon, Social Disinformation is a Threat to Democracy, and You Can Help Fight It. All the links for that and all the ways that you can get in touch with Raelyn and Common Cause is in tonight's show notes. Welcome to the show, Raelyn.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm actually thrilled. When Jenny Stevens published her article, and I told you this before the show, when she first published her article, she was like, you definitely got to get her on the show. The work that they're doing over there at Common Cause with the social media monitoring is just stellar. So I'm so pleased you could join us tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much again to Jenny for writing that article. It's always amazing as a trainer to have such a rave review of what you're doing, like actually published in the news. So thank you so much for that, Jenny.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things I got to say about the downside, or I guess the upside, if you will, of all the craziness that has been happening here in Bucks County has been that we've have a growing and burgeoning kind of independent and kind of progressive media place who's actually kind of giving voice to the organizers on the ground that are doing the hard work of social movement building and making sure that our democracy is protected. And so, kudos, and Jenny has been, doggedly following folks that are doing this kind of work. So this is awesome. So, before we kind of jump into kind of what you do in this work and so on, I want to step back a little bit. So for folks, who may not be familiar with Common Cause, the work you're doing, give us a little kind of introduction to how did you get kind of involved in this work and kind of interested in it, and a little bit about what Common Cause is doing and what your team and specifically is focused on.
Totally. So I'll just start about why I got involved with this. So I'm 22, by the way. So I'm Gen Z, and I came of age like during the height of like the Trump presidency and like, all the foolishness in general that was happening in 2016 and 2020. And it really inspired me to go to university, St. Edward's University, and get my degree in political science. And when I tell you the defining moment was when I got to my political theory class and they told me that we don't live in a democracy, I was like, what do you mean? That like really flipped everything on its head for me. And so I got into learning about why we don't live in a democracy, the voter suppression, just the historic struggle in general to get rights for all. And then it led me to learning more about the ways that we just still don't have these rights today, these people who are still trying to roll back the rights that we do have, and preventing the progression of access to voting rights for all, as well as rights for all in all sorts of different things like healthcare and environmental justice and all these other key issues that I care very deeply about. So I actually got involved with an organization called Made to Save, who did vaccine outreach, so making sure that people had the facts about the COVID-19 vaccines. And that was when I actually saw firsthand the coordinated efforts to spread lies about the vaccines and target them to specific communities and telling them that, you shouldn't get this vaccine because of this, that, and the other, all of them lies. And specifically one that stuck with me is targeting the Black community to make them not get vaccinated by bringing up the Tuskegee experiment, where they were experimenting on all of these Black people and infecting them. So just really pulling in on actual generational trauma that impacts the Black community and weaponizing it in a way to where it will cause more harm. Absolutely made me rabid. And so, of course, as soon as I learned that an opportunity like this that has to do with voting rights and elections came up, I was on it. I care very deeply about making sure that people have the right information and that we're fighting back against people who would like to weaponize incorrect information. But yeah, so that's what led me here. Enough about me, though. I want to talk about Common Cause as well. But Common Cause, we are a nonpartisan and nonprofit organization. So we have been around since 1970, and our organization is both grass tops and grassroots. So what I mean by that is we have litigators on the Hill fighting these voting rights cases. And grassroots, we have monitors, volunteers, just everyday people plugging in where they can to fight and support democracy where they can. So that's what we do. And at the Stopping Cyber Suppression program that I am in, I'm the field coordinator, which means that I basically I recruit and I train our monitors. I teach them how to recognize online mis and disinformation. I teach them how to respond to it. I teach them how to actually search and find it. And I think a really big misconception that people get about this work is like, oh, you have to be so technologically skilled to do this. When no, most of my monitors are really like in their 80s, 70s, like they're older.
That's
and
crazy.
I
was like, that's awesome. Like a 90-year-old that's doing this.
Yeah, we have 90-year-olds out here, like Grandma for Justice for real, like searching social media, pointing out these bad actors, reporting them, getting their content removed. And on the flip side of that, connecting these voters to support and making sure that they have their questions answered if they're confused about voting. And in all of that, in our Stopping Cyber Suppression program, we're partnered with the bigger Election Protection Coalition, which is like this coalition of all of these other nonprofits who also care about making sure that voters are protected. So we do that in tandem with all these other great organizations. But I do want to give a special shout out to the Civic Listening Corps, who is another monitoring program, who is like our parent program. So shout out to all of you. They have a shift right now. So if you're listening right now, thank you for everything you're doing and happy monitoring, but also a major shout out to our volunteer captains who are making all this possible. So my program really hinges on empowering people to do this work themselves. So we have amazing volunteers who have stepped up and said, I want to take on more. I want to lead shifts. I want to actually lead this effort. So they're running shifts by themselves right now, monitoring upcoming this runoff election. So shout out to my captains and shout out to all of my volunteers.
Well, that's amazing. And I'm thinking about how critical this work is right now. And just the brief kind of historical kind of echoes, if you will, that you've already mentioned about what we saw during COVID and, the targeting of, say, the most vulnerable communities that we saw. I have, I teach at Kutztown University too as well. And I had a student that was, that had just done this research and like targeting in particular particular Vietnamese communities with all sorts of misinformation during COVID and how that got folded into kind of this election suppression stuff, right? With disinformation and misinformation too as well. And to know that there's, we seem to have these cycles that kind of run through where, they just get, they get jet fueled, if you will, through social media, whereas because everything is moving so quickly. So the work that you're doing, I think, is just absolutely critical. And we had I don't know if you know Sarah Aniano at all. She was a graduate student and got interested in this as a volunteer, tracking some of these conspiracies things. And it's amazing to see how many volunteers, people just basically started noticing something was weird. There was these conversations that they were hearing that suddenly members of their family or friends were talking about these wacko kind of like conspiracy theories, but we're believing them and leading them to kind of explore this further. And it seems like there's a lot of folks that have stories similar to yours about kind of coming up, being confronted with this, seeing it happen, and then asking that question is, how do I go about and kind of not just recognizing it, but then doing something about it, which I think is the kind of cool move. So what does it actually mean to have a program that does this? Like, let's get into just some of the nuts and bolts. You have these volunteers and what are they looking for? How do you organizing it? Once they flag this stuff, what do they do with it? Take us into like the day-to-day a little bit about what this work actually looks like.
Yeah, totally. So I would say when I went about creating this program, the number one thing I wanted to do was make sure that it was accessible. So not only do we have accessible training times, like it's very accessible content. I have recordings out for everyone. If you want to check the links in the podcast notes, you can actually access the recorded training right now and take it and get all set up. But once our monitors are trained, learning the difference between mis and disinformation and how to respond and report it when they see it, they're actually directed over to our Common Cause Action Team Slack channel, which shout out to Jenny for this description of it. She called it a democracy on demand center, which I find beautiful. But yes, it's amazing. But yeah, it's basically this huge channel. It has over 10,000 members in it right now. And this houses our text banking, our phone banking, and also my social media monitoring program. So basically, once you get in there and say, hey, you've signed up for a shift, then you're able to actually show up, and I will give you a little rundown on Zoom. I'll say, hi, friends. This is the disinformation that we're seeing. This is the state that we're actually targeting in. And here are the words that I want you to copy paste from this document into your search bar on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, whatever social media platform you have, copy paste this word, and it'll be words like voter fraud or stop the steal, things like that. So when you copy paste that into your search bar, you'll just pull up a whole world of disinformation, people saying and making all these claims, and you'd be very surprised to see who is actually making these claims. It's large accounts, verified accounts. Very well-known pop culture people, very well-known politicians in general. So once our monitors actually find content like this, they're able to report it to us. And so they report it to us using the tip line. And then my team at Stopping Cyber Suppression, we're actually able to get those tips, bundle them up, categorize them, and actually take them to Twitter's doorstep, to Facebook's doorstep, and say, hey, man, you got to remove this. See, this cannot be online. This actually violates your own terms of services, and here's why it should be removed. And I will say we have had a moderate success rate with getting things removed like that, when the actual goal of this is to keep putting pressure on these platforms to hold them accountable. Because if you really look at what we're doing at the Stopping Cyber Suppression, like, we are doing social media platforms jobs for them. My monitors are coming in and dedicating their free time to doing content moderation, basically content moderation that these platforms should already be doing. But once we actually take it to the platforms, they decide whether or not they're going to take it down or fact check it. A very helpful thing that they will do sometimes is mark the post as misleading and make it to where people can't further comment or engage with it, just so that stops the spread of the disinformation a little bit. But we do not just leave it there at all, because we do recognize that these platforms are often very slow to respond, if they respond at all. So we take it a step further. We actually go directly to people who need help and assistance. So people are always like tweeting like, oh my goodness, I don't know where my mail-in ballot is, or like, this line is entirely too long to vote, or I don't even know what's going on at my polling location. And we're also looking for things like that in addition to disinformation. And when we find someone struggling, we're actually connecting them to help via the 866-OUR-VOTE hotline, where on the other end of the hotline, when they pick up the phone, it's actually a legal professional or somebody who understands voting rights, who are able to connect them to the resources and help that they need. And then in addition to all of that, we actually share inoculation content, which is just like pro-voter, pro-democracy content. It's cute, it's flashy, it's like a GIF sometimes. Sometimes it's just like a little picture, like, go vote, here's the right information. Or our most popular one we're going to be spamming tomorrow night is stay in line, Georgia. If you're in line to vote, you can vote. So just making sure that we're flooding the zone with that pro-democracy content, the facts about voting, the facts about where to get help, just so that people are a lot less likely to see the disinformation on their feeds. But that is just the general life cycle of what goes on at our program.
No, this is awesome. I mean, I think that, one thing, I could imagine individuals who begin to, recognize that there's disinformation that's being sent. And the number one question you always hear from people start coming across is, well, okay, so I reported it to Twitter, and like, God knows what happened to it then, I mean, because if you're just this kind of like random individual who's trying to do the right thing, you've got no clout, you've got no background, you don't even know whatever happens. And it seems to me is that by, this is my word, I don't think you use it, but kind of like by bundling this stuff together, once they're, people are listing this, and be able to categorize it and to be able to go there with a chunk of information that's brought through all these different people to a platform, and to have an organization that is actually pushing to kind of get them done. At the very least, like you said, like, let's be honest. I mean, these folks, they don't want to respond to half this stuff. That's not their business model, right? But, if they know that you've got actually an organization with eyes on this, right, who's actually, like you said, kind of grassroots to grass tops, that does have legal teams, right, that is able to kind of push their buttons, then the hope is that this helps increase that pressure along with all the other groups that you mentioned, to start getting some kind of movement in these directions. Because something's got to happen, because they're not going to do it on their own. We see what Elon Musk has just done with Twitter, right, which is now it's making it, like, pardon my words, but a shit show of possibility that's happening there. When, look, these platforms have become part of the way that we do democracy in the 21st century. So it becomes so critical that this information is checked, and the nonsense that's misleading people is taken off. So that's amazing. And I think that, there's an example that I think that you used in Jenny Stevens's article, was that, sometimes it's something simple. Sometimes you're not clear even if it's misinformation or disinformation, right? Somebody might just have the wrong time that polls close, right? And just to check stuff like that, especially if there's, I think about young folks that are getting involved, or people that have not been politically connected, that have been kind of woken up in the wake of, attacks on kind of women's body autonomy, like attacks on voting rights, attacks on our democracy. And people are waking up to this stuff. And, the voting system and everything is clunky, and it's not the kind of thing that people really know how to navigate. To have somebody that's going to give them simple content of like, hey, this is where you go, this is who you contact, and you can trust this stuff, is so critical.
Totally. And like, I want to echo your words, a shit show indeed, because honestly, and I want to kind of go back to what you're saying about reporting things and not being sure that it's actually being done. The metaphor I like to use here is like when you get to the crosswalk and you press the button, is that button really doing it? We don't know if it's actually doing it, or if it's just there for decoration, right? But yeah, that's why we want to continue to put pressure on these platforms, so that one, we know that when we press the button that it's actually doing something. But two, they're more upfront about what process goes into this. Is someone there to review it? In Twitter's case right now, no. But is someone there to review it? What is the penalty being taken against these accounts that continue to spread this disinformation? So yeah, definitely wanting to hold our social media platforms accountable.
Yeah, no, we didn't talk a lot about this before the show a lot, but the midterm elections, what was that like? Just that experience? I mean, was it kind of like chock full of disinformation? Does it seem that there was any, say, good actors out there? I mean, what was that experience like trying to navigate through these midterms?
Oh, yes. So I will say, actually, like to start this off on the brightest news, there were so many good actors. I will say on election day and leading up to election day, our election protection coalition, and then the coalitions that all of our partners from election protection are a part of, were all like arm in arm posting inoculation content, posting inoculation messaging, and hosting these events teaching people how to recognize online disinformation. And you could really see the results of that, because I would go online every day and check out the hashtag #OurElections. That's where our inoculation content lives. I would go check it out, and there would be posts from all these people in like different languages, like posting our inoculation content, translating it, and taking it, tweaking it, making it fit their own community. So there were a ton of good actors out there on election day, a ton of people out there working to make sure that our voters were not suppressed, because they saw the writing on the wall, right? But we did get flooded with election misinformation this midterm cycle. But it was really interesting in the way that it manifested. So, of course, there's just the general disinformation of like, vote by mail ballots. They're calling them a scam. They're calling them rigged. They're saying it's stealing your vote. We also saw people spreading posts that are distrustful of our poll workers.
Yeah.
So, a term that they would use is ballot mules. So, they're like stealing ballots, they're trafficking ballots. So, we saw a lot of that. But something very alarming that we were also seeing was people getting so riled up and angry by these posts that they were actually organizing in-person action to fight. I'm using air quotes for everyone listening right now, to fight fight the rampant voter fraud that is going across our country, right? Number one, there is no rampant voter fraud. But number two, these people were using this disinformation as a recruiting tactic. Yes. And it was actually recruiting folks who would be willing to go in person and do something like canvass their neighborhood, or canvass not their neighborhood, but neighborhoods where people of color reside, and interrogate them about how and why are you registered to vote? Do you actually live here? Are you a dead voter? AKA voter intimidation.
Or and just another in a parking lot outside the polling place with an AK-47, right? I mean, literally, I mean, they were doing that.
Exactly. Just like camping out in parking lots, being suspicious, just filming people, just doing a lot of disruptive and even dangerous activities in the name of fighting this voter fraud that does not exist. And so that was really alarming to us in our Election Protection Coalition to see that that's how the disinformation was escalating. People were not only just saying that there is widespread voter fraud, they're actually willing to go out and act on it. And there's actually quite a few instances of people were saying, like, I'm going to be a poll watcher just so that I can make sure that I'm there to personally stop fraud. And so what we really were seeing from the midterms and the disinformation surrounding it was just this atmosphere of distrust. Like, you can't trust the poll workers. You can't trust your Secretary of State who actually comes up with your election rules. You can't even trust USPS to handle your mail-in ballot correctly, these people were saying. And the worst part about it was the distrust in your general neighbors, because a lot of these polling locations, you have to live in the neighborhood to access them in a lot of states. And so it was just people going, I have my eye on you, fellow neighbor, fellow voter, to see if you are trying to steal the vote. And so, the mis and disinformation just cultivating this atmosphere of distrust. And it also, I'm not going to lie, it had a lot of us at Election Protection Coalition on guard, ready for the worst on Election Day, ready for some sort of political violence at the polls, because that is how the discourse was going. But I am very happy to say that we did not have any major incidents like that. However, again, back to the positive, we had so many people just ready with the messaging, with the support, with the what to do if something happens at the polls, like guidance, that we all felt very ready for if anything did happen.
Well, that's awesome. I was surprised. This is the first time I'm in my local precinct. I was elected last year, the judge of elections. So I was running the poll place, and this is and this is the first time that we've had. I mean, there's always poll watchers that'll come in as kind of a matter of course, but this time with the Doug Mastriano campaign, we had a guy. I grew up with the punk rock scene, right? So I mean, I would have flagged this guy as a skinhead. That's I mean, he was in his black kind of quasi camo kind of stuff like this, shaved head. And he literally sat there the entire time. He wasn't disruptive, right? And in part because, the people who work this poll place, I'm at one of those polling places where everybody has been working there forever. I'm the newbie, right? And they're Democrats, Republicans, across the board, and they generally have a commitment to making sure people can vote, right? So I mean, just as kind of they're there because they believe in civil service. That's it, right?
Totally.
And so at one point, some of the other folks are saying, you start feeling bad for this guy because he's watching people actually working with each other, making people's access to the ballot easier. And he's got to sit there the whole day because he was just got into this state where he thought, we got to get there because there's going to be this fraud. And then the second thing that happened is that this is the only thing that got me concerned is there was messages that started showing up both in social media, but it was in door hangers like in Cumberland County and some other places that started showing up around here that said they're trying to steal the election. Wait, polls are open, right? The dates of how late, here's where the polls are open to, and go as late as possible to the polls. Because if you go as late as possible to polls, that's to make sure that your vote's going to count. And I'm thinking, like, I know what like the end of the night is like, and everyone's exhausted. And if you have a flood of people at the end of the night, and now lines that are stretching out, and now it's ripe for these kind of, you know, these disinfo kind of, you know, these disinfo folks to go out and say, see this example, they're trying to prevent them from voting, right? It's like they were constructing the narrative ahead of time. And that was the thing that got me concerned. And when you just said you saw people actually using this to recruit, that's exactly what kind of went through my mind is like, oh, this is a whole different animal now.
Yes, and I want to kind of go back to what you said earlier about people like just spreading things online that they think are helpful because yes, you have that person who is there to like, you know, find the fraud, but you also have those posts that are kind of worded in less unassuming ways that are like, oh, to beat the cheat, make sure that you go here. We need to overwhelm the system. We have to do our part to stop fraud. So you're really like appealing to people's desire to make sure that we have safe and secure elections and saying that this is what you need to do because there is fraud, period. That's a fact. But that's what they're saying. They're just saying there's a like widespread fraud and this is what you have to do to beat it. And so now you have all these people waiting in line, this long line that they've created because they told all these people to come later. And what we're noticing when instances like long lines or any kind of mundane technical error, like let's say a machine starts like going down a little bit and they have to come and bring a new one and it causes polling delays, or if there's just simply a paper ballot shortage like there was somewhere in Pennsylvania. So they're actually weaponizing things like this and saying, this is your proof. This is your proof that they're in there stealing the vote. This wouldn't be happening if we didn't have rigged elections. However, this is all stuff to actually just manufacture evidence of voter fraud where it isn't there. It's just mundane clerical errors, really. And also just people simply having to wait in line and recruiting a bunch of people to vote when there wasn't really the plan to be accommodating that many people.
Right. And if you think about it, if you like you step back out of the kind of, you know, this environment, it's like this is just stuff that happens in life, right? Sometimes that there's like an error and you got to fix it. Sometimes that there's some confusion, so you've got to kind of check in to figure out what. I mean, this is just kind of normal stuff that you would happen, and to weaponizing that kind of thing is, you know, it's a creating a crisis of fear all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you this. So that was the midterms. We saw this. Now we've got, you know, the runoff in Georgia that's coming tomorrow. And you've already gave, you know, some shout outs to folks who are doing this social media monitoring work tonight. So they're basically doing that same kind of stuff. I mean, what's that situation? Have you been hearing what's been happening kind of in the Georgia situation? Do we see the same kind of pattern of misinformation, or is that lessened a little bit since we're past the midterms?
It's a lot lessened. You know what I will say is actually very interesting. Since we are a nationwide monitoring organization, we're kind of keeping tabs on all states, but focusing in specifically on Georgia just for this little bit. Yeah. We're actually still seeing Arizona as the epicenter of disinformation. Yes, we're still seeing like all these claims of rigged voting come out of Arizona. And mostly what we're seeing out of Georgia is just long lines and people trying to make sure that they have the correct information because they have such a truncated deadline. Like they really had 3 weeks to prepare on how they were going to vote. And so if you were going to vote by mail, it's really like 1 week to prepare. So yeah, we're really just seeing right now a lot of voter concern and questions that we're answering and making sure that people are connected to the hotline. But yeah, the real gritty disinformation is still coming out of Arizona, talking about rigged voting machines, believing that the election machines are stealing their votes or switching them. Also saying that the paper ballots are just being used to cheat, just like different different little conspiracy theories surrounding Arizona to cast doubt on our election processes in total. But the thing that is great to see about Georgia, though, is again, we have all of these people just rooting for Georgia nationwide, making sure that they are reporting that disinformation and sharing those cute little corny stay in line gifts to be shared far and wide. So that's really all the action we're seeing out of Georgia right now.
Well, good. And then we're going to find out, this is probably the last one we're going to see for a bit. And we'll know the results, obviously. Well, we'll know results this week at least. We'll have an indication at least tomorrow night once polls close where things go. So we shall see. So set us up then. So then, okay, you got these. We went through the midterms. Obviously, we got this runoff in Georgia now, and then you've got a presidential election that's going to be. Well, we got these kind of smaller municipal elections that are happening kind of in 2023. Then you've got presidential election in 2024. But what happens to this program that you got going once we get through this round of elections? I mean, now that, I suspect that you're not just kind of like, closing up shop and saying, okay, misinformation is no longer there. What happens next?
Definitely, absolutely not closing up shop, but kind of a little bit. Our Stopping Cyber Suppression program is going to close. That's not to say we're not monitoring. I'm just going to transition all of my monitors over to the Civic Listening Corps, which is our partner monitoring organization. But yeah, our next focus is these legislature sessions, right? Because while, yes, disinformation is meant to confuse voters about the voting process, make them a little bit more likely to make these mistakes or slip up while voting so that their votes can be thrown out, or to try to prevent them in total from making it to the polls in general. The real end game purpose of election disinformation is to manufacture support for voter suppression laws. So what they are about to do, you heard it here first. So when you hear this and see this happening, you say, Raelyn told you so. What's going to happen is they're going to take all these stories and claims that they've been making up this whole time about rigged machines and like vote by mail. And they're going to say, look at all this fraud that happened, and we need to pass more restrictive voting bills to make sure that they do not happen anymore. And these voting bills are going to directly disenfranchise voter, making it difficult to register, making the ID requirements more rigorous, and just all these other steps and barriers to voting that might make someone unable to actually cast their ballot. So our next step is really going to be to, one, kind of chronicle all the work that we've been doing here. Because if you think about it, we have actually created a very good, solid archive and snapshot of what every major election moment has looked like up to this point for this year. So we know exactly what was happening on election day because we were looking at it. We know exactly what was going on in Arizona because we were focused in on it. So we're going to take that as evidence and proof to say, look, they tried to lie back here. This did not actually happen. This is not a legitimate reason to pass more restrictive voter bills. So we're just going to keep an eye on that conversation from our bad actors and see what they're going to say happened that didn't actually happen, and what reasons they're going to give for justifying suppressing the vote further. So yes, please do join us. This rodeo ain't over yet. So we're going to be monitoring all of our known bad actors and just social media in general to keep an eye on that conversation and to make sure that we're protecting our online communities from these claims, because again, a lot of them really do target well-meaning people. Because I don't think any of us like the idea of somebody's vote being stolen. I don't think any of us like the idea of like, oh, my vote doesn't count because there's rigging. And so it really weaponizes that want to have free and fair elections and tries to say, well, if we put this one more barrier in place, maybe it'll be a little bit safer. Maybe this will stop the fraud that doesn't exist. So we just have to make sure to put out that good pro-voter, pro-democracy content, telling an accurate story about what happened on our election days. And also just reporting that disinformation where we see it and where we can. And I guess the last thing, cherry on top, holding these social media platforms accountable. Just because Elon wants to have a shit show on Twitter doesn't mean that we should all just be subject to these election lies that anyone is just and it's not even like it's targeting people who are like unaware, like anyone. These are very sophisticated and crafted lies, a lot of them. So we should be free from that when we go on social media.
100%. Let me ask you this too, as well as like, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about that we've talked about on this show, kind of like historically, that folks that are pointing to this kind of not just the kind of the random person giving disinformation, right? The stereotypical person with the tinfoil hat or something like that on the corner, but these really sophisticated patterns of I look at it as a power grab, right? It's about being able to control and kind of to pick the electorate as opposed to the electorate picking the representatives. It's about being able to kind of a very small set of interests of people that are very, very powerful and having a bunch of bad actors that are very sophisticated in manipulating people. But sometimes, for the longest time, you say those words to people and they're like, oh, we've got a conspiracy theory over here. Given what's been happening and that the kind of more public attention that's getting paid to this stuff, are you finding that people are more receptive to hearing that, like about the need to actually pay attention to disinformation, or do you still get a little bit of the kind of like, you're sounding like you're trying to manipulate me with a conspiracy theory?
No, and like that's very valid. And before I started this work, I was like very worried about it. I was like, oh no, I do sound like I have a tinfoil hat on right now. I'm like
That's like
talking
my
about
life.
dark money. I'm talking about secret money and like secret schemes to like manipulate us. But I will say I have not had that reaction yet. Every single monitor, every single person who I've come into contact with through this program said, I've seen it. I've seen this disinformation be spread. I watched 2020. I watched the insurrection happen. I watched what led up to that. I actually have a family member who like I love dearly who just started saying all of this stuff. And I know that they're watching these streamers. I need to learn how to fight back against it and protect them from it. So definitely not feeling like I'm peddling conspiracy, which has been super, super validating. And even my volunteers who show up and they're like, I have not personally ever seen this, but if this is true, it's a problem. And I think this thing that we sometimes forget about is online, we exist in little echo chambers.
Right.
Our online looks very similar to our friends online. However, there are a lot of echo chambers. And so this experience for many is just stepping outside of their online bubble and seeing, oh goodness, they don't post about this in my little blue state, but here in Arizona they are, or like here in Florida, this is what they're talking about. So I say to anyone who feels like I'm wearing the tinfoil hat, come and see for yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's the power right there. Is like, well, look, I'm not asking you to just believe me on faith. Here, let's do it yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's why I love these trainings. And like I said, we've got links in the show notes tonight to go on and check out these trainings, check out the pack. You could sign up for them, and just learning for what to look for, and then become part of the solution. I think is like so much a part of what we can do. And and the perspective that I always come from is like, it's about empowering people to local level and building from the ground up. Building from the sense of community-based power that we're kind of in control over our own destinies. I mean, it's like something as simple as that, right? But it's getting these kind of tools. So let me, you mentioned this before we got on the show, and I think this is awesome. So I mean, we just got through Thanksgiving. Right. So we just got through the holiday, which is known to be like, Uncle George is like going crazy again over there. Right. Whatever it might be. But, this is, I mean, I think it's a real concern for a lot of folks, especially you kind of mentioned you have like a family member or something like this who just ends up going down these conspiracy holes, or is kind of not even just like the whole conspiracy hole, but even is just, inundated with some of this disinformation. And, I understand that people don't want to go home and have knockdown, drag out fights with their family, right? Especially during the holidays and stuff. But you mentioned before we got on today, and I think this is so cool, is that you actually have a kind of a program coming up, right? Which is about how to do this, right? How to actually go home from the holidays and kind of not end up kind of like, disowned from everybody in your community, right?
Totally, yes. That's our talking to our friends and family training series, which is coming up. Which actually, some background. I used to do this at Made to Save, the COVID disinformation
Oh,
organization I
that's
used to
great.
work at. So, what we learned from these trainings is that people are so much more likely to listen to their friend or family member who they know loves and trusts them and like generally wants the best for them when they're talking about issues like this that are a little bit more inflammatory. You remember how inflammatory the vaccine conversation was,
Ooh.
perhaps just as inflammatory as like the voter fraud conversation and the disinformation conversation. So we've learned that leveraging those real life personal connections with your friends and family is how we actually stop the spread of this disinformation. It's really having that conversation with your Uncle Joe who's going on that rant about, oh goodness, I bet you do feel very upset that there's voter fraud. Wouldn't you feel like very deceived if someone told you this was the case when it wouldn't? Like just having that genuine conversation and letting them know, like, well, if you want to know if something's real or fake, this is where you go. And you actually point them to a trusted source like PolitiFact Fact Check if you want to look at anything like that. But yeah, our training series is actually going to arm you with the tips and skills for how to navigate these conversations. Trust me when I say they are actually meant to be as non-inflammatory as possible, and I teach you how to kind of avoid ruining family dinner for your holidays. So please, yes, tune in for those at the end of this month to learn how to talk to your friends and family about election disinformation.
That's fantastic. Well, Raelyn, I'm so like thrilled you have on. And before I let you go, are there other things that you want to kind of shout out for folks? Other places where they can go to get more information? Like I said, we got a bunch of links in tonight's show notes. But what can people do if they want to get started or or learn more about this work?
Yes, absolutely. Number one, please go check out that amazing article that Jenny wrote about my program. And if you want to stick around after that, go ahead and click on that link for my training. It's completely self-paced, completely self-guided, and you just take a little quick quiz and then you're in. You're able to sign up for a shift. So you'll find that link as well. And even if you're not going to be able to join us as a monitor, I want to leave you with just a couple of tips for knowing whether or not something is real or fake. Here's some of my main red flags when I'm actually monitoring myself to figure out if something is true or if it's a liar, liar, pants on fire situation. Number one, check out whether or not that post is like using all caps. It's trying to make you angry. It's trying to make you sad, because we know that disinformation, it tries to get you to abandon thought and lean into emotion so that you're less likely to think, is this true or not, before you start clicking on things. And that's thing number two. If they're asking you to click or donate or take some form of action, know that this is manipulatory in general. And I say this even for like organizations like us at Common Cause. Like if any organization that asks you to click on something, there is a motive, and you have to check out what that motive is. So look into the organization, who funds them, and what's going on there. And then lastly, if you see verified accounts talking about things like voter fraud, just know that voter fraud has been one of the most lucrative topics. I think the tally was Trump got somewhere near $111 million within just 3 months of fundraising off of widespread voter fraud. So our bad actors know that this will get them money. So check out if they're trying to get you to click on a live stream or donate to something, or if they're promoting a book. That is usually going to be your red flag. And as a political science graduate, and at this point, election news, if it is riling you up, take with a grain of salt. It is usually pretty boring. So that is a really good litmus test to know if it's true or fake. And if you encounter anything like that, just head on over to reportdisinfo.org. That is reportsdisinfo.org, and send us a screenshot. Send us a screenshot and a link to that content, and we will do our best at stopping cyber suppression to get it removed, fact checked, or at the very least flood your social media feed with pro-voter, pro-democracy content that is meant to fight that claim.
100%. Well, that's fantastic. I want to reiterate that again. The link is in tonight's show notes. That's the public disinformation tip line. That's reportdisinfo.org when you see this. Raelyn Roberson, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope as your work continues and stuff, we can have you back on. I'd love to get kind of reports because as you kind of are, expanding this program, because I know that you're going to, and I hope that there's folks in this community and our listening audience too as well will consider taking up some of these trainings and actually kind of joining and help the stop the suppression. Thank you so much for joining tonight, and we look forward to talking to you soon. All right, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much to all of my monitors. You are the best, and you are everything that makes this program run. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. Shout out to everybody who's kind of listening live tonight, and everybody who will be listening afterwards. I want to remind you that you can help support this show by heading on over to patreon.com/rcpress and become a patron for as little as $5 a month. We got some I got some multiple applause here that are kind of showing up here for a great, excellent presentation. Great having you on. Fantastic learning about this stuff. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And please spread the word. One little small step that you can have is share out this content with the folks and let them know why you want to share this content and help them get connected up with some of these trainings too as well. Thank you so much, and we'll be talking to you soon. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. Whew, it's been a week. I'm glad to be back in this seat again. No flu, fingers crossed. End of the semester is on its way. We'll see you on the flip side, everybody.
See ya!